Number 8. Russian naval ships. After the Soviet Union fell, the once proud Russian Navy faced serious funding shortages and neglect from the Moscow government. It managed to keep some of its fleet battle-ready, but many of its ships became obsolete. Others went uncared for and eventually just fell into disrepair. GlobalSecurity.org estimates that the number of warships the Russian Navy owned fell by as much as 40% during the 1990s. By 2003, the supply was down to 300 vessels at the most, and this may be a generous estimate according to news publication Foreign Policy. That same year, Fleet Admiral Vladimir Kuradov told the state-owned paper Krasnaya Zvezda that since 1995, the Navy had received just 12% of the funding it needed to remain fully operational. And because of this, it had no choice but to decommission ships that it couldn't afford to maintain. Kuradov also said that there were plans to further reduce the Navy by 1/5 of its size over the next several years. But Russia can't really retain its status as a world power without having a strong Navy. And in 2004, Navy Commander-in-Chief Vladimir Kuradov said that there were no plans to downsize its ship force until 2020. He said that the Navy would be able to repair and maintain its ships, and that there were even plans to upgrade some of its surface vessels. But by then, it was too late to save the dozens of abandoned ships that were just left to rot in the port of Murmansk. In 2007, EnglishRussia.com published Google Earth images of the derelict ships, which appear to include a nuclear-powered icebreaker, an oil tanker, several submarines, cruisers, and more. Number 7. Ancient Sahara settlements. There's a lot that even the experts still don't know about the past, and sometimes they get the story wrong. Until relatively recently, archaeologists thought that there were very few large-scale human settlements in the Sahara Desert, where the extreme heat and dryness make survival extremely difficult. Their knowledge is also limited because the unforgiving conditions make it hard to get out there and perform fieldwork. But that's slowly changing thanks to advancing technology that enables scientists to at least partially explore archaeological sites without physically traveling to them. In 2015, a pair of researchers identified thousands of previously unknown towns, villages, irrigation systems, cemeteries, and other evidence of early human settlements across the Sahara. They made the amazing discoveries using satellite and other high-tech imagery, which revealed that many of the ancient abandoned structures are still standing. Most of the sites are connected to the Garamantes culture, which began building cities, forts, and farms in what is now southern Libya around 1000 BC. They created a network of settlements that were centered around desert oases while rising to prominence during the early centuries of the Common Era. The civilization's decline began during the 8th century. Experts think that the Garamantes may have depleted all the region's groundwater, giving them no choice but to leave their homes and villages behind. The findings are helping researchers identify which sites to excavate and are providing a more thorough perspective of the Garamantes movement than scientists could possibly get by relying entirely on groundwork. Thank goodness for technology. Number 6. Lost civilizations of Afghanistan. Some of the world's most archaeologically rich regions are off limits to scientists. Sadly, some of these places are war-torn and their historical sites are under the constant threat of destruction. And it's often hard to predict if and when a violence-riddled country will be safe to explore. This is precisely the case when it comes to Afghanistan, where Taliban forces have been warring with the Western-backed government for decades. For now, researchers have no choice but to investigate archaeological sites in Afghanistan to the best of their ability without actually going to those places. One way they do this is by examining declassified spy satellite and military drone images. By the end of 2017, a team of American and Afghan scholars had identified thousands of previously uncatalogued archaeological features throughout the country, which was part of the Silk Road trade route connecting the East and the West. The number of documented sites has more than tripled to 4,500. The discoveries include huge complexes called caravansaries, which were built to house travelers until the 19th century, as well as ancient canal networks which are invisible to the naked eye but can be seen using sophisticated imaging techniques. Top-ranking archaeologists were quick to praise these findings, and some even came out of retirement to contribute information from decades-old excavations. Australian archaeologist David Thomas told Science.org that he expected tens of thousands of sites to be found. He pointed out that identifying and documenting them is the first step to protecting and preserving them. With any luck, perhaps the violence in Afghanistan will come to an end, and it'll finally become safe to investigate this deeply historic yet little-studied region. Number 5. Altinum. Altinum was an ancient Roman port and trade center in northern Italy's Venice Lagoon. It was actually one of the empire's wealthiest cities and was bigger than Pompeii, with as many as 20,000 people living there at its peak. Traders from all over the Mediterranean came to do business at Altinum, which was a thriving maritime emporium by the 1st century BC. Residents started to leave when barbarian invaders arrived in the area during the 5th century AD. They moved further into the lagoon, settling in what is now the city of Venice. The local bishop was one of the last holdouts in Altinum and finally left during the 7th century. Unlike most of Europe's ancient cities, the city was never built over. Its abandoned churches, villas, gates, city walls, theater, and other structures became buried. Today, the ruins sit below farmland. The lack of buildings on top of the ruins made it possible for researchers to produce a detailed map of Altinum in 2010. Using satellite imagery and remote sensing technology, they were able to look at the ancient architecture beneath the soil and catch a glimpse of what the city and the Roman Empire were like during their final years. Number 4. The Lost City of NonMadol. The Sadelur dynasty ruled over the Micronesian island of Pohnpei from around 1100 to 1600 AD. Its capital city, NonMadol, consisted of several small man-made islands linked by a network of canals. People first began using the site sometime during the 1st or 2nd century. Islet construction started by the 8th or 9th century, and megalithic structures were implemented between 1180 and 1200 AD. At its peak, Pohnpei was home to around 25,000 people. NonMadol was reserved for the nobility and ruling elite, with a population numbering somewhere between 500 and 1,000 residents. The ancient metropolis was built using extremely heavy stones and columns, and experts admit to not knowing how workers moved and maneuvered these gargantuan parts. The architectural style is unique to the site, making the city truly one of a kind. There's no doubt that these buildings qualify as engineering marvels of the ancient world, but they contain no artwork or other artifacts that reflect their builders' culture and customs. Even the tools and construction methods they used at NonMadol are unknown. It's not easy for archaeologists to travel to the remote island, which sits 2,500 miles from Los Angeles and 1,600 miles from Australia in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Experts took a closer look at NonMadol using satellite images as part of the Science Channel's online series What on Earth, but they still know next to nothing about who lived there or what their lives were like. NonMadol is sacred to Pohnpei's modern-day residents, who call it the Ghost City. Most of what's known about the Sadelur dynasty comes from folklore, which claims that the civilization ruled over Pohnpei for 1,000 years. According to legend, it was built by twin sorcerers named Olisipa and Olisopa. With experts at a loss to explain how ordinary people moved boulders weighing up to 50 tons each, it almost makes more sense to believe that there were supernatural forces at play. How do you think NonMadol was built? Do you think supernatural forces really helped build the city? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Number 3. Mysterious man-made mounds. Dmitry Day spends his days working as a business manager in Kostanay, Kazakhstan. Several years ago, he started dedicating his free time to studying satellite images of the region he lives in. He was inspired by a TV show he'd watched about ancient pyramids being found outside Egypt, and wondered if Kazakhstan might have some exotic ruins of its own. Day found dozens of strange man-made features spanning a remote part of the steppe that occupies an area roughly the size of New Jersey. These mounds and earthworks are barely noticeable at ground level, but they're hard to miss from a bird's-eye view. They were built in a variety of shapes, including circles, crosses, squares, and more. Experts acknowledge that the formations were created by humans, but they can't seem to agree on their age or purpose, or even how many of them there are. A team of researchers studied 2 out of the 55 identified human-made sites in 2015. Creating the structures required immense effort, in the words of archaeologist Gira Motuzaiti Matuzevikoti. She said that they were built in the middle of nowhere using heavy, clay-like soil, and that many of them are larger than a football field. Matuzevikoti told National Geographic that there are 2 distinct groups of features. One group can be found on high plateaus, while the others are located along rivers and near burial sites. The team dated 2 of the mounds to 800 and 750 BC. At the time, the Iron Age was just beginning in the region. But it's hard to determine just how old the constructions are because they contain no organic material, making it impossible to use conventional dating methods. A research team led by Day believes that the mounds may be up to 8,000 years old. On the other hand, Matuzevikoti speculated that the structures probably date back to around 2,000 years ago. Day thinks that the sites functioned as solar observatories for a Neolithic sun cult. Archaeologists were quick to point out that he may not be wrong, but that there are numerous other possible uses for the structures. The only way to know for sure is to continue studying them in the hopes of being able to draw a more definitive conclusion. Number 2. Syria's lost civilizations. A few years ago, archaeologists detected 14,000 lost ancient sites hidden in northeastern Syria. The team searched an 8,800 square mile area for the ruins using a new technique for mapping large-scale human migration patterns. It involved studying Cold War-era spy satellite images, digital maps of the Earth, elevation data collected by NASA, and other remote sensing technology for signs of ruins hidden in the landscape. The findings are helping experts learn about little-studied ancient civilizations that once lived in the war-torn region. Far-flung sites like these tend to receive less attention from researchers than palaces, large cities, and other major ruins. But they're important to study because these are the places where people probably lived long before migrating to more populated areas. Tracing these movements helps to reveal new information about long-term migration trends throughout the regions, according to study co-author Jason Err. The team identified human settlements that are difficult to detect with the naked eye by looking for anthrosols, which are soils formed from mud brick architecture and organic waste. Anthrosols display distinct differences from undisturbed soil. They're lighter in appearance and have a finer texture and a higher organic content. Much to the researchers' surprise, there are some unusually large settlements without any freshwater sources nearby and in areas that get very little rain. This indicates that the societies who occupied these sites developed advanced enough irrigation techniques to survive after depleting any freshwater sources that were there when they moved in. Syria is considered by many to be the birthplace of human civilization. It is here that some of the first major achievements were made by early societies. Sadly, there are things we will probably never know about these civilizations as civil war continues to devastate the country over a decade after the fighting began. Some of Syria's most important archaeological sites and artifacts have been destroyed by the terrorist group ISIS in an attempt to wipe the landscape clean of anything they see as a threat to their beliefs. Number 1. A massive structure hidden in plain sight. Around 2,000 years ago, workers in what is now Jordan carved out the city of Petra from pink sandstone. Nicknamed the Rose City, it was built by a nomadic culture called the Nabateans. It functioned as a vital link along trade routes between Mediterranean and Arabian seas. The civilization flourished for centuries as a key player in the incense trade. It's clear based on what the Nabateans left behind that they were highly developed for their time. A sophisticated irrigation system delivered water year-round to the 30,000 people who lived at Petra. Scholars know very little about this advanced ancient society. The city began to decline after an earthquake rocked the area in 336 AD, and things got even worse after Petra fell under Islamic rule during the 7th century. It was eventually abandoned and was more or less forgotten about until its rediscovery in 1812. Over half the site remains unexplored to this day. But archaeologists know that there are fascinating discoveries waiting to be made thanks to advanced satellite and imaging technology. In fact, that's how researchers discovered a massive stone monument buried in the sand in 2016. Measuring about twice the size of an Olympic swimming pool, the building had gone unnoticed by the naked eye for over 150 years, as it sat hidden in plain sight in the middle of the ancient city. It dwarfs the other buildings at Petra, yet nobody knew it was there. Study leader Sarah Parsak is an archaeologist who specializes in finding ancient sites using aerial images. She told National Public Radio that the building's purpose is a mystery and that it could have been used for religious reasons, as an administrative center, or for something else. It's different from all the other buildings at the site and is largely a mystery as researchers continue working to learn more about it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.